Imagine a funeral in 1880. The line of mourners stretches for over 2 miles through the steep, fog-drenched streets of San Francisco. Over 30,000 people, nearly a sixth of the city's entire population, have gathered to pay their respects. Wealthy bankers in silk top hats, laborers with dirt under their fingernails, and socialites weeping into lace handkerchiefs. This was not the funeral of a president, a governor, or a war hero. It was the funeral of a man who died with $5 in his pocket, lived in a tiny rented room, and spent his days wandering the streets in a tattered military uniform. This was the funeral of His Imperial Majesty, Norton I, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. To the world outside San Francisco, he was a madman, a delusional pauper who had lost his mind along with his fortune. But to the people who knew him, he was the only monarch America ever truly loved. The story of Joshua Abraham Norton is not merely a tale of eccentricity. It is a profound exploration of the thin line between madness and vision, and how a city's collective kindness turned a broken man into a living legend. Our story begins not with a crown, but with a catastrophe. In the mid-19th century, San Francisco was a wild, lawless frontier fueled by the madness of the gold rush. Joshua Norton arrived there in 1849, a shrewd and ambitious immigrant from South Africa with $40,000 in his pocket, a massive fortune for the time. For several years, he was a respected businessman, a merchant king of the wharf who built a real estate and commodities empire. He was rational, calculated, and wealthy. But in 1852, Norton made the one mistake that would shatter his life. Hearing of a famine in China, he attempted to corner the rice market, buying up every grain he could find to drive the price to astronomical heights. It was a gamble of Napoleonic proportions, but just as he thought he had won, ships full of rice began pouring into the harbor from unexpected sources. The price plummeted. Norton's empire collapsed like a house of cards. He spent years in bitter litigation, losing his money, his status, and eventually his grip on the reality that had betrayed him. He disappeared from public life for months, retreating into the shadows of the city's boarding houses, a ghost of the man he once was. Then, on September 17, 1859, the ghost returned. Joshua Norton walked into the offices of the San Francisco Bulletin and handed the editor a document. He wasn't asking for a job or a loan. He was issuing a proclamation. It stated that at the peremptory request of a large majority of the citizens, he, Joshua Norton, was declaring himself Emperor of these United States. In any other city, in any other era, he would have been laughed out of the room or dragged to an asylum. But San Francisco was a city built on reinvention and dreams. The editor, sensing either a great joke or a bizarre spark of genius, printed the proclamation. The next day, San Francisco woke up to find it had a sovereign. Joshua Norton did not just wear the title, he inhabited it. He donned a blue military coat with oversized gold epaulets, a feathered hat, and a ceremonial saber. He walked with a regal gait, carrying a cane like a scepter. And remarkably, the city began to bow. The genius of Emperor Norton lay in the fact that he took his job more seriously than most actual politicians. He didn't just parade around, he governed. He spent his days inspecting the streets, checking the condition of the sidewalks, and ensuring that the police were doing their duty. If he saw a public nuisance, he would issue a decree to have it fixed. He attended every session of the state legislature and the local courts, sitting in the front row to ensure justice was being served. He even began issuing his own imperial currency, scrip that he used to pay for his meals and his modest rent. And here is where the story turns from strange to sublime. The merchants of San Francisco accepted it. They hung signs in their windows that read, "By appointment to His Imperial Majesty, Norton I." They gave him the best seats in the theaters and the finest cuts of meat in the restaurants. They didn't do it out of pity. They did it because Norton had become the soul of the city. He was a constant in a world of chaotic change, a man who possessed a dignity that transcended his poverty. But the emperor's reign was not without its battles. The most dramatic moment of his rule occurred in 1867 when a young, overzealous police officer named Armand Barbier arrested Norton. The charge was involuntary servitude, a polite 19th century way of saying the man was mentally ill and needed to be locked in an asylum. The city erupted in fury. The newspapers ran scathing editorials calling the arrest a travesty of justice and pointing out that the emperor had shed no blood, robbed no one, and despoiled no country. The chief of police, sensing a public relations disaster, ordered Norton's immediate release and issued a formal public apology to His Imperial Majesty. Norton, ever the gracious sovereign, granted the officer a full imperial pardon. From that day forward, every police officer in San Francisco saluted the emperor when he passed them on the street. It was a victory of the human spirit over cold bureaucracy, a moment where a community decided that a man's harmless delusions were more valuable than a rigid adherence to the rules of sanity. As the years passed, Norton's decrees began to take on a strange, prophetic quality. While the United States was tearing itself apart in the Civil War, Norton issued proclamations calling for the formation of a League of Nations to prevent future conflicts, an idea decades ahead of its time. He also issued a series of commands for the construction of a great bridge and a tunnel that would connect San Francisco to Oakland. At the time, the technology didn't exist, and the idea was dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. Yet, decades after his death, the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge was built, following almost the exact path Norton had envisioned. He saw a future that the sane people of his time were too blind to imagine. He was a man who lived in a world of his own making, but that world was often kinder and more logical than the one the rest of the population inhabited. He abolished Congress several times for their corruption and incompetence, a sentiment that many of his subjects secretly shared. There was a profound loneliness to Norton, however, that added a layer of tragedy to his regal persona. He lived in a 9-by-12-foot room in a boarding house on Commercial Street. His only consistent companions were two famous stray dogs, Bummer and Lazarus, who supposedly followed him on his rounds. When Lazarus died, the city mourned. When Bummer died, Mark Twain himself wrote a satirical eulogy. Norton's letters to the royal houses of Europe, including Queen Victoria and Napoleon III, were mostly ignored, yet he continued to write them, offering advice on global diplomacy. He was a king without a kingdom, a husband without a wife, a man who had replaced the biting pain of his personal failures with the grand protective armor of an imperial title. He chose to be a king because being Joshua Norton, the failed rice merchant, was too much for his heart to bear. The end came suddenly on a rainy night in January 1880. Norton was on his way to a lecture at the California Academy of Sciences when he collapsed on the corner of California and DuPont streets. He died in the mud, his feathered hat rolling into the gutter. When the police searched his room, they found the true extent of his empire. There were no riches, no hidden gold. They found a collection of walking sticks, his tattered uniforms, and a few fake telegrams from world leaders he had written to himself. They also found a single gold sovereign worth $5. The headlines the next day simply read, "Le roi est mort," the king is dead. The city that had indulged his fantasy for 21 years didn't stop there. When it was discovered he was to be buried in a pauper's grave, the Pacific Club, a group of wealthy businessmen, stepped in and paid for a magnificent rosewood casket and a funeral fit for a true monarch. Why does the story of Emperor Norton resonate so deeply, even a century and a half later? Perhaps because we all, in some small way, wish to redefine ourselves against the harsh judgments of the world. Norton refused to be a victim of his circumstances. He took the wreckage of his life and built a throne out of it. He taught a city how to be kind, how to find joy in the eccentric, and how to respect the dignity of a man who had nothing but his honor. In a world that often feels cold and transactional, the reign of Norton Y stands as a testament to the power of imagination. He wasn't just a man who thought he was an emperor, he was a man who made an entire city believe he was one. He proved that sometimes the most insane thing you can do is to be exactly who you want to be, regardless of what the world tells you. As the bells of San Francisco tolled for his passing, the people didn't mourn a madman. They mourned a king who had ruled not with iron, but with a wooden cane and a heart that was too large for a regular life. Long live the emperor!